Hey guys, and welcome back. Now this is going to be my review / Easter egg / references / parallels to the comics video when it comes to Hellstrom. I guess we can't say it's Marvel's Hellstrom, even though it's really Marvel's Hellstrom. However, though, they did drop the name out of the title of the series, so right now we're calling it Hulu's Hellstrom. Now the first thing I want to mention over here is my sincere apologies for my voice. I've been having this cold for a couple of days, and yeah, my voice is totally messed up, so apologize for that in advance. This is going to be something carrying over for the rest of this video. Another thing I want to mention over here is throughout this video, I'm not just going to talk review, Easter eggs, parallels, and references. I'm also going to talk the fact that this is probably not just the first season, but also the only season that we're probably going to see of Hulu's Hellstrom. But let me though start with an interesting part, my rating of the series and my objection to a lot of the critics' ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. My rating of this first season happens to be an 8 out of 10, a solid 8 out of 10 actually. Could have been better, it's not the best thing in the universe, not the best production we've seen on TV in years, but nonetheless, it was pretty solid. I think in terms of the horror genre, combined by the fact that this is Marvel's first attempt at something of the sort out of the comics, I'd say it was really solid. There were a lot of cliched moments, but nonetheless, in the end, overall, it did a great job at achieving what it intended to achieve. But speaking though of the critics' ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, the series scored a 39%, which is pretty bad by the way. The thing about this is I think the series was doomed in the eyes of a lot of audiences, a lot of critics, knowing that this is the remnant of the old regime at Marvel Television, because there's no Marvel Television anymore really, it's just Marvel Studios, and Marvel Studios is doing both movies and television. The fact that this was filmed in such a way that it would have a season 2, that little bit of a beautiful Easter egg at the very end, Lily. I'm going to talk about that in detail when discussing the Easter eggs and the top moments on the series. However, that little bit of an Easter egg kind of opens the door to a second season. The story is not over yet. Cathara has not been fully defeated by the end. I mean, she has been defeated as of now, but nonetheless, she's gonna be back, and she's not even Cathara, she's something bigger. Something greater that has been hinted throughout the series and then confirmed at the very end. Gonna talk about that as well in detail. But nonetheless, we know that Mr. Kevin Feige is not going to leave anything out of Marvel Television, be it a good thing or a bad thing, a good series that is, or a bad series. So yeah, it is doomed from the get-go. Chances are it's not going to be renewed, and that's why when you look at it as a critic, you might find yourself wanting to compliment Kevin Feige and ignore the series. The audience ratings though, they're a lot better on both IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. On Rotten Tomatoes, the series, when it comes to the audience, has scored a 93%, and on IMDb, the rating is 6.8 out of 10. There's a scarcity of voters, reviewers, whatever you want to call them, on both sites. Not everyone has watched the series yet, and not everyone has rated it yet on either side. But yeah, we've got 930 votes on IMDb. The rating is 6.8 as I just mentioned. That was lower yesterday and even lower the day before, and it's just increasing as more people watch and as more people log in to review this. But alright though, that's the talk about the rating, the possibility of a renewal or lack thereof. Now it's time to talk about how I felt watching the series. I really had one thought in mind. I hate you, Kevin Feige. I miss Marvel Television, especially Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Netflix series, especially Daredevil out of those Netflix series, followed by The Punisher, and then Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and finally Iron Fist. Wasn't really the biggest fan of Iron Fist, but nonetheless, you get the gist of what I'm talking about over here. I mean, I even missed the series that were created by Marvel Television in conjunction with Fox and FX. The Gifted, Legion. Legion was a great series. Now, I hope what's coming from Marvel is better. However, though, what I'm thinking over here is what we're going to see from Marvel Studios in the future is basically all about TV series that are really more about serving the movies rather than actually being their own thing, rather than giving us a full fleshed out story. And that's the sad part about that aspect. Kevin Feige, with his new TV series, he's gonna cater to those people who only care about a Marvel television show, not because it has a story, but because it links into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's got the cameos and all of that good stuff. That's what matters to that group of fans. But he's not gonna cater to me. He's not gonna give me Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a story that could at times hint at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even get cameos from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but once it stops doing that, it doesn't really matter because it's still giving me a good story. But okay, let's start with the core of the series. To get started, where is the Marvel name in all of this? I personally think they wanted to distance this from Marvel for so many reasons. One, there is the fact that it is a horror series. They don't want to do that. It's not the PG-13 kind of stuff that Marvel does. And of course, two, Kevin Feige is distancing anything that belongs into the previous regime from his currently managed business. I think it's all little details that are being done in order to make sure that this series is not as well received as Jeff Loeb, for example, might have wanted it to be, trying to make sure that, yeah, this was the right decision. Putting me on the helm of things is the right decision. These kind of things are going to be failures, and you don't want it associated with Marvel. I think it was funny though that I thought the closest we're going to get to seeing the name Marvel on this series is pretty much when we read the name of the actress that portrays Daimon's mother, aka Elizabeth Marvel, but nonetheless we got to read it elsewhere, because at the very least there is the admission that this is a series based on Marvel Comics, you know, based on the character out of Marvel Comics that's out of the intro preceding every episode. So yeah, we got the name Marvel, just not in the regular way that we're used to. Now, the series starts off by introducing the two Hellstrom siblings, Anna and Daimon, as children of a serial killer. We know that on the pages of the comics his father is Marduk. Marduk is known as Satan on the pages of the comics, which leads into Daimon himself being known as the son of Satan on the pages of the same. However though, that was just the introduction, and even though they were introduced as children of a serial killer, we get to know later on that their father was of the supernatural kind. They are as well of the supernatural kind. Now, Anna in the comics is known as Satana, and Satana in the comics was pretty close to her father. That's kind of hinted at repeatedly over the course of this season. Like, she is identified here as the kid who was closer to their father at some point in time, which she was in the comics as well. She was her father's little helper. The part of the series about Victoria, the mother, being institutionalized, that's also true to the comics. There is a little bit of a deviation when it comes to how she was institutionalized or what happened there. But in the comics, the part about the father focusing more on the daughters is also true. So in the comics, she would one day walk in on them and find Satana performing this ritual of sacrifice with her father. And that's when she breaks, that's when she's driven mad. In the comics as well, Victoria was very close to Daimon, a lot closer to Daimon than she was to Satana, which is exactly what we got to watch on this series. I guess the major differences here are all about her possession, which on the pages of the source material was not the case. She was never possessed, all of that stuff, and neither did she ever make it out of that mental institution. She did die over there. Daimon, on the other hand, would only discover that history of his mother's, all she knows about his father, all that she saw after she dies, finding her diary, he would read about all of it. Now, I'm not always going to talk about specific events on the first season because a lot of the themes over here do extend throughout the entire season, but you do see throughout the entire season that both siblings, Daimon and Anna, have got too much power and they can be pushed off the edge towards becoming the bad guys. I think the part as well with Daimon being possessed later on in the events of the season, that's all about Daimon in the comic books turning into a villain at some point. Not because of a possession, but he does on the pages of the comics start on the side of good and then turn bad. So yeah, that's very suiting of his character in the comics. A simple Easter egg, but one that does say a lot. Still on the Hellstrom family though, we do need to talk about Cathara, because Cathara is not just the villain of this season. For the most of it, Cathara is also the person who occupied or possessed Victoria's body throughout the majority of the season. And the thing about Cathara is, she is an enemy of Daimon Hellstrom on the pages of the comics. Now, in the comics, Cathara is freed from hell by a Satanist and pretty much occupies the body of that Satanist, possesses it after killing her, and that is how she's introduced into society. She does plan and try to kill Daimon Hellstrom as well on the pages of the comics, just like she did over here, as part of this big master plan to take over Earth in its entirety. So yeah, she is pretty solid in terms of a villain, but the surprise does come towards the end. She's not really Cathara, she remembers her name, she is Lily. We're gonna talk about that Lily piece at the end though, because I think that's the biggest Easter egg of all in this season. It leads into a season 2, if we ever get a season 2. I think it was possibly as well done in that way because Ghost Rider, if the series would have went through, would have aired after this one, and this could have fed into that, and they could have created their own universe. Even if within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they'd still have their sort of own sub-universe. But nonetheless, and before I move on from this one, I gotta say over here that the whole Victoria being possessed by Cathara, that's quite true to the comics, not in terms of the possession of Victoria, but rather the possession of someone who's quite close to Daimon Helstrom, and that happens to be the Satanist that I just mentioned. Don't remember her name right now, but nonetheless, that is true to that person. Now what she did over there using the body that she occupied is use that friendship, tried to use it to turn Daimon against Satana, have him actually fight her, which is what she achieved over here by having someone else possess Daimon. That's the only difference, but nonetheless what we watch on the series with Cathara in that situation is pretty much an Easter egg to that in the comics. But that said though, I'm gonna circle back to Cathara closer to the end of this video to talk about that other demon that she is, you know, Lily. But that though brings us to that other main character on the series, Gabriella Rossetti. And Gabriella Rossetti is basically a fill-in for the man known in the comics as Gabriel the Devil Hunter. Now that I think about Gabriel, is there are a lot of similarities between him and Gabriella over here. There's even a little bit of the character of the Caretaker that's pretty much inspired by the comic book Devil Hunter. Okay, so let's talk about the Caretaker bit first. The Caretaker did speak of his brother, what happened to his brother. That's very reminiscent of what happened with Gabriel's wife. And that's what basically turned him in the comics towards exorcisms, towards God, towards all of that stuff really, that he went for beyond the death of his wife, just like the Caretaker took this career path after his brother's death. But that though did not last forever. I mean, he did become a priest, kind of went on the same track as Gabriella on the series. At some point, he was possessed by a demon, one that forced him to take out his own eye, which is pretty much reminiscent of what happened with Gabriella over here, you know, becoming pregnant. It's completely different, but it's kind of similar in a way, the possession and all of it. Now, he would be approached on the pages of the comics by one Dasadia, the history of whom isn't known, but knowing that Dasadia was basically the product of the merging of the spirit of his wife with that body makes you think, okay, there's some possession stuff going on over there, which kind of makes it similar as a relationship to her relationship on the series with Daimon, you know, working together as devil hunters. Now, close to the end of the season, we do as well see some kind of loss of faith when it comes to Gabriella, and that's the case on the pages of the comics with Gabriel the Devil Hunter. He does lose his faith a lot, turn to alcohol, he does come back to his faith later on, and then relapse again, but nonetheless this process, rinsed and repeated, does happen a lot to him on the pages of the comics, which is exactly what we watch on the series with Gabriella towards the end, you know, losing that kind of faith. Not exactly turning to alcohol in this case, but nonetheless that glass in her hand at the end of the season, that's pretty representative of that aspect of the character on the pages of the comics. Now all of this leaves us with two other main characters on this season, pretty much the Caretaker and Dr. Louise Hastings. And speaking of these two, kind of pours into the whole Lily thing at the end of the season, kind of explains it as well, who in the hell is Lily? Okay, so both characters, Louise Hastings and the Caretaker on the pages of the comics, are known in conjunction with the Ghost Rider. They kind of help them occasionally. One is a member of the Darkhold Redeemers, that would be Hastings, and the other one is a member of the Blood, that would be the Caretaker. So the entire thing about the Caretaker on the series is pretty true to the comics. The Blood is a little bit dark in the comics, but they are most definitely not an evil organization. I mean, you get that vibe at the beginning with the series, but they're definitely not. Now this is the part that kind of ties up with the Ghost Rider universe. If you look at their relationships in the comics, the kind of people that they worked with and helped, you'd also find the name Doctor Strange popping up a lot. It would even pop up a lot when you're reading about Satana or you're reading the comics and the part involving Satana. But I might not have mentioned this, it's already been distanced from the MCU, probably as well upon request from Marvel's management, because we know this was supposed to tie in with Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider was going to be Robbie Reyes, and Robbie Reyes was already part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which makes him essentially part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But with all the changes, that as well did change. So you could understand that the only thing that this series had in common with all those other series out there, ones out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that Roxxon name that we get to read at the very end of the premiere of the season. But okay though, how did these two pour into that Lily bit at the very end? So a common enemy for these two, Hastings and the Caretaker on the pages of the comics happens to be the Lilith. The Lilith are basically the children of Mother, the mother of demons. The mother of all demons is known on the pages of the comics as Lilith. That's pretty much who she is. That's pretty much whom she identifies herself as at the end of the series. I'm Lily. My name is Lily. That's pretty much Lilith out of the comics. To be honest, I did catch it early on, like I did feel there's something more than Cathara to this character, didn't know it was Lilith, but the repetition of the reference to her as mother was clicking something in my brain, I just didn't know what was clicking, and at the same time making Victoria, the mother, Daimon and Anna's mother, into the victim, into the possessed one, made it all into one major season of foreshadowing just for this one character, made it all into one major Easter egg running throughout the entirety of the season. Now, one of the accounts on the pages of the comics of who Lilith is places her as Eve in Adam and Eve, only instead of Adam and Eve, it's Adam and Lilith. According to that account as well, she would end up with Mephisto bearing his children, so that's really where the whole mother of all demons bit started. There's a lot more to it, not going to go into detail, maybe on another video, because we're already past 15 minutes on this one, but nonetheless, you do get the point. So this is our new villain, and she is a major villain on the pages of the comics, and could make for an amazing villain for a Season 2 if they go for a Season 2. But with the Blood, Lilith, Hastings, and the Caretaker, all of that stuff put together, you can see how they were working towards the Ghost Rider series. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but I'm thinking Lilith was planned to be a joint villain. Like Lilith was possibly gonna end up being the villain of a major crossover between both series on Hulu. Now, I did mention earlier that Louise, Hastings, and the Caretaker are basically associated heavily on the pages of the comics with the Ghost Rider, but so is Lilith and the Lilith being one of the races that ended up existing because of her offsprings, demonic races at that. Now, there is a lot of room for a Season 2. There is a lot of room with the Lilith story and the Lilith and all those other races that are considered her offsprings. The thing is as well, each of these races have got their very own set of superpowers on the pages of the comics, like their own set, different from one of these races to the other, which means that we've got a lot of stories that they could tell on this series, a lot of stories that they could have told if they went ahead with the Ghost Rider series. I know, Kevin Feige wanted the Ghost Rider for himself, and he's already got that. He's basically got the entirety of Marvel in his pocket. That said though, this is probably the only non-PG-13 horror genre Marvel production that we're gonna see in the near future, if ever, and I don't think we're gonna get a second season, but I'm definitely hoping we do get one. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the season. Let me know what Easter eggs you caught. I know there are a lot in there. I did notice a lot in there, but I wanted to highlight the major ones that actually relate to the characters and the stories. I might actually try within a week to post another video with full details on every single Easter egg. Probably gonna have to watch again to catch each and every one of them, so do let me know in the comments as well if I should do that. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, be it a Hellstrom video or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this one. Stay safe and have a great day.